Welcome back to the Mentor Roulette grind. This time, the Wheel of Jobs decided that we play Bard on a Monday evening. And this time, we have quite some variety with plenty of challenging duties. For duty 1, we went to E4N, Eden's Titan, which is, I'd say, an excellent Bard warm-up, with enough things to watch out for while also having most of the rotation available. Speaking of which, I felt I did pretty well overall, not dropping my dots a single time. There were a few times throughout the duty where Imperial Arrow drifted a bit or I overcapped Gauge unnecessarily. I also missed out on a pitch perfect at one point because Wondrous Minuet ended. That said, the duty went super well, and Kaifa was nice to give some directions to the first timer in the group. The classic mechanic that tends to catch players off guard on this one is when Titan moves the thing on his back around. If he enhances his arms, it means you need to be in front of him for the first slam and then at the side of him for the aftershock. If he instead produces a vehicle, you need to be on the side of him facing inward on the arena, and then run past the aftershock afterwards. Again, a very nice run. I can also say that it feels like it takes all of my concentration just to get the Bard rotation this well, so I anticipate a lot of mechanical mistakes in this set of Mentor Roulettes. For duty 2, we went to A7N, Quickthinx Allthoughts. What is really awkward here is that this is one of those normal raids with some mob packs before the boss, and I made the grave error of starting with Wondrous Minuet on those. It would have been way better to just use Mage's Ballad or Army's Paean, as none of those packs live long enough to justify using other big cooldowns. Because of this error, I spent the whole fight trying to gradually fix my song alignment, as optimally, I'd want Wondrous Minuet to align with my raid buffs. But, at the same time, holding my raid buffs is a bigger loss, both for me and for everyone else. So the main way I tried to adjust it was by the way I cycled through my songs. But it would take far too long to smoothly cycle through the songs enough to get Wondrous Minuet to properly align. That's a general tip that applies to most jobs, by the way. If you get your rotation misaligned in some way or another, usually using cooldowns on cooldown is better than sitting on everything until they all align nicely, as that likely means you'd lose out on additional uses of these cooldowns. This is especially important with raid buffs where the rest of the raid actually, overall, tend to benefit from this buff more than you do, because 7 other people benefiting from more battle voices is more important than you benefiting slightly better from that battle voice aligning just right for you. Now, in regards to the boss fight itself, at one point Quickthinx Cat appears and sends a heart towards him. If it reaches him, he gains a damage buff and, supposedly, will attack a bit more erratically. I'm not entirely sure what the erratic part means, maybe you do. But this whole thing can be avoided by killing the heart before it reaches him. Of course, if not enough people are attacking it, it is just wasted effort. Another tip for this fight is in the sections where the boss grabs a player to send off into a cage. Usually, just that player on their own should be able to overcome whatever challenge is in there, with the rest of the party doing whatever may be possible from the outside. So, stepping away so no one else gets grabbed is often preferred. Oh, also, this was Mentor Roulette duty number 600 completed. For duty 3, we were an instant replacement in Mount Ordeals, Rubicante. In this run, due to having ended up here somewhat recently before, I remembered there was some sort of shorthand to find the safe spot in the mechanic with the spinning circles and the triangle lines. Unfortunately, I still didn't quite have the shorthand memorized, so I still sort of relied on others to find the spot to stand at for me. Especially since I don't have the mental space to both do the Bard rotation right and also find these safe spots. Another hilarious little detail is that Rubicante consistently has this cutscene overlap exactly with the 2-minute burst. I'm pretty sure he has a 100% accuracy in stopping my burst because of it. I mean, the fight is perfectly consistent and predictable, so it's on me that I didn't remember, but still. Another thing in extension of this is that I'm pretty sure every time I've done this fight previously, Rubicante has had time to swap back to phase 1 form before his death, but not this time. So I guess a particularly fast random group. Nice. For duty 4, we went to World of Darkness. Right at the Chimeras at the start, I end up frozen by Ram's voice because I was too caught up in having lost the location of my interrupt button. If you ever needed evidence of how rarely I play Bard normally. I did eventually find it, but a little too late to say the least. On Angra Mainyu, we even saw level 150 Death activate, killing all 3 tanks. What is particularly funny about that is that this happens entirely due to inaction or greed. Level 150 Death is a relatively simple mechanic. The primary target of it gets snared so they can't move out. When it resolves, if a multiple of 3 players are in it, then they all die. If any other number of players are in it, then nothing happens. The level 100 Flare works the same way, in that if an even number of players are in it, it explodes some massive damage on them. I actually have a video, link in the description, from back in Endwalker where we messed around with these mechanics a bit, and we did determine that it isn't quite even or multiple of 3, but rather the mechanic actually checks whether the combined level of all the players in the circle adds up to a multiple of 100 or 150 in the case of death. Which does suggest that any number of players unsynced would trigger level 100 Flare in Dawntrail, as long as they are level 100. Interesting, right? In the fight with the Atomos, my team's Black Mage was particularly clever in optimizing here. They simply planted themselves on one of the platforms and made use of ethereal manipulation to come into safety when the knockback came. Take note that if you are under the Atomos when it does the circle knockback, you won't fall off. Later in the Cerberus fight, I decided to stay out and help with ads, since I was on Team C, Chains as we all know. And it did work out, although B lost both of their healers on the way in. A pretty good run overall. For duty 5, we went to Rathalos Extreme, and this was an absolutely ludicrous run. Right out the gate, the Viper dies immediately. The Sage then reses them. Remember, in this fight, you should just use the respawn button. Only for the Viper to faceplant straight back down again. I even tell our Viper to do exactly this. Use the respawn button. But no reaction. Eventually, the Sage relents and raises them again, and after this opening chaos, everything just goes fine. Like, for the rest of the fight, everyone just plays well. The Viper even uses Limit Break on Rathalos at the right time at the end and everything, and we get him down within 2 knockdowns. Personally, I make use of Troubadour and Warden's Paean, especially when the healer gets targeted by the stack marker. Of course, Warden's Paean is available for every set of stack markers. Now, despite everything that did go wrong, for some reason, I never really got targeted by anything, so I came out of this fight with 10 potions and full HP. Random luck to the rescue there, I guess, although I would have preferred if I also got hit a bit to share the burden. For duty 6, we went to Runs on Pizzas. And look, Agent Monica's here. Hello! It turns out they haven't had to deal with this duty before, really, so we quickly resolved that. Remember, the sequence is 1. Get the ads down. 2. Get the turtle to 50% and get it to the herb patch thing. 3. When it hits 50%, kill the fire sprite. And 4. Activate the herb patch and get the turtle into it. Done. It is important to stop attacking the turtle once the fire sprite comes in, as killing the turtle fails the duty. For duty 7, we went to Ifrit Extreme, and turns out Navi knew me. Hello! Hey! Listen! For our first attempt, we start with total chaos, a lot of death from searing wind and whatnot, but we do sort of eventually stabilize. The problem is that by the time the 3rd set of nails come about, we are simply too exhausted and out of gas to survive. The problem with this fight is that the first 2 sets of nails is like the easy part, so making it to the 3rd set of nails is kind of whatever. The last set of nails is the problem part. Remember this, and consider that we were already pretty much out of MP on both healers and had nearly half the raid dead by the time the nails came down. I mean, if we really focused up and nailed it, we could probably make it from here, as this duty is beatable with 3 players total, link in the description to that stream, but it's only possible if you really bring it. On the run back, we discuss a bit on tank switching, searing wind's positioning for the healers, and then give it another shot. For the first set of nails, I set up dots on all the nails as best I can to maximize the damage I can do. No danger here. For the second set of nails, we have 2 DPS die very quickly due to various explosions, but we manage to mostly recover by the time the nails are dealt with. As we make it into the last set of nails is when things really get dicey. Multiple times throughout, I have to completely halt damage and pray everyone else holds as well, as I drop so low that any damage would kill me. A few times during the fight, Custom yelled for a melee LB on the big nails, but I can assure you that you don't need it. In fact, you have a surprisingly long time to deal with this entire nail phase. But because there is no timer, it can feel a lot more stressful. You don't know when Ifrit says stop exactly. At the very end of it all, we come sliding sideways over the finish line in our broken down car as Ifrit goes down, with 1 DPS, 1 healer and 1 tank left alive. I don't know if this counts as a very nice performance, but I will say we all brought it as much as we could, so well done to everyone. For duty 8, we went to Lengthy Life for Royalty, and turns out Max knew me. Hello! In this run, I try my best to keep an eagle eye on the slimes to interrupt their sleeps, but when someone finally casts it, I missed a chance. On the bright side, Warden's PN allowed me to save the healer anyway. This duty is surprisingly entertaining when you actually have tools to counteract the enemies. For duty 9, we went to Rathalos Extreme again, and let me just preface this by saying it seems the healer was a first-timer. That said, we wipe in reasonably short order thanks to what appears to be a complete misunderstanding of the fight's mechanics, on the healer's part especially. On the second try, we somehow make it through, but overall my observation is that the healer did not at all recognize that being any less than topped up is dangerous unless you're a tank. I also don't think I saw a single Ishuna in the entire fight. The upside there, I guess, is that I got a lot of use out of Warden's PN. There was also a time where I used Sprint to get away from the healer with the stack marker, since if they're not going to use Ishuna, sharing the stack marker only makes things worse. With no Ishuna casts, the best I can do is hope whoever gets targeted can survive all 3 hits, and then I can use my Warden's PN to clear the entire debuff at the end. Now, just to clarify on some of the things I mentioned before, in phase 1 of this fight, as normal healing is perfectly functional, the best a healer can do, broadly speaking, is aggressively heal up everyone if they're not topped up. Sure, there are limits, especially if players get repeatedly hit by avoidable damage, but overall, we want everyone to feel safe to save their potions for phase 2, just in case. Leading into phase 2, the healer also should aim to aggressively top everyone up. In fact, in some capacity, you could argue that phase planting on every single healing cooldown and expensive heal they have at that very moment would be optimal, as all of those cooldowns become meaningless once phase 2 begins anyway. In phase 2, the best things a healer can do is aggressively use Ishuna to minimize damage intake, and if they have any barriers and whatnot that isn't blocked by the phase mechanic making healing unfunctional, then those can help too. For example, a Sage's Heimer would work. I believe Divine Benison would also work. As Rathalos takes very little damage while in the air, the fact the healer isn't attacking as much isn't that big of a deal, although the healer helping with damage of course pushes to the knockdown more quickly. But just to summarize, from the healer perspective in this fight, being super aggressive with heals in phase 1 is a good idea. Try to make sure everyone can save their potions for phase 2. In phase 2, aggressively helping where you can is still great. The reason why it is important to safeguard any potions you can is because if a player is, hypothetically, possibly, targeted by the stack marker at 3 separate occasions, if they had to use any potions before phase 2, they will probably die the 3rd time due to running out of potions. For duty 10, we went to Curing Front. As Bard, this is straight up just quick knock spam. Although, as Bard, you can interrupt 1 or maybe 2 cure casts throughout the duty, which could also be helpful. Relying on other players to do the single target damage may be optimal though, since Quick Knock just is that strong for Bard. And finally for duty 11, we went to Seat of Sacrifice, and Cocte, the samurai from Rathalos Extreme, is also here. And, turns out Auru knew me. Hello! Naturally, not much happens in phase 1, but a funny little detail about this transition with the active time maneuver is that, well, it takes both hands smashing keys on my keyboard to keep it maxed out. However, apparently, the less full it is, the more each key press helps, designed to intentionally make it look harder than it is. Now, we actually get really far in the fight on this first try, but what ends up wiping us is the lesson that when there are 2 stack markers, unless you are absolutely certain they don't cause problems if they overlap, never cross the streams. The stack markers from the Warrior of Light's LB2 applies a physical vulnerability debuff that makes the second stack marker lethal, so you can only participate in one of them, unless you're a tank with an invuln. As a result, both of our healers, a tank and a DPS, go down all at once. We would have lost both tanks as well, but Camilla, the warrior, saw it coming. Despite the impossible odds, we still try to push forward a bit further, but then El Dragon Dive, the Raid White, comes in, taking out another DPS. And the Ninja Spectre's stack marker takes out the remaining DPS, and with only Camilla left standing, they deem it the right move to wipe it. We learn from this mistake and get back in the fight. A few tips for this boss then. When he gets into positions to the circle or donut AoE, you can tell whether it is the donut AoE or not, depending on whether there are several circles around his sword. If there are circles on it, then it will be a donut. The second tip is dealing with the fire and ice imbuements. If it is fire, make sure to stop all action as he swings the sword, as every action, whether it is attacking or even moving, will hurt a lot and can absolutely kill you. Stay put until the debuff expires. If it is instead ice, make sure you are actively moving when he does the swing, and maybe for a few seconds after too. Not moving stuns you for several seconds and also hurts a lot. If for whatever reason you cannot remember which one he imbued, keep moving until you see which one it is from the swing. Not moving when it is ice is far more punishing than moving for the first bit of the fire version. Now, a funny thing that happens, unique to this fight, is that if you attempt to use an offensive limit break while the boss isn't busy doing something, he will use Hallowed Ground, turning the limit break into a damage loss for everyone. This actually happens here when we attempt an LB1 suddenly. Because of the specific requirement that you have to time it so he isn't busy, I feel like this interaction is quite rare. Not too challenging, but challenging enough to keep things interesting. A good set of duties this time around. The Wheel of Jobs is also quickly starting to empty out. Now with only the scouting jobs, a mage, a healer and 1 ranged physical remaining. That still means an 80% chance of getting a DPS, of course. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, in Shadowbringers, Shadowbite was the AoE equivalent to Sidewinder, and they both scaled their damage with the amount of dots you had applied to your target. For Shadowbite, I believe the damage to all targets depended on the dots on the main target. This interaction was removed in Endwalker when repertoire was moved to the songs ticking on their own, meaning there was no other reason for the bard to apply dots on AoE anyway.